So the Chicago Bears just cleared the final hurdle on finishing this coaching search, and we're at a spot that it's time to finish this search. And the moment the Lions lost on Saturday, the Bears cleared the final barrier to getting Ben Johnson in the building, and that was the interview with Tennessee State head coach Eddie George. Now, the timing of this interview, it tells us there is no doubt that Ben Johnson is their first choice at Hallis Hall, and they're going to do everything that they can to get their guy. And in this video, I'm also going to go through some rumors on both sides of this coaching search, Chicago versus the Las Vegas Raiders, and what this really means and when this process is going to get done. So let's kind of get to it. Let's get to the Bears move. They immediately got former Pro Bowl running back and Tennessee State head coach Eddie George to come in for an interview. Now, I can talk about how qualified he is. He actually is qualified, but have zero doubt. This was done to satisfy the NFL Rooney Rule, get the final minority candidate in for an in-person interview. This also comes after their interview with Ron Rivera, so it makes them compliant. So now they can move this week on getting their head coach hired. In-person interviews can start as early as today with Ben Johnson after that playoff loss. Now, I don't love essentially the Rooney Rule being something that's not really respected, not really followed, just a box to check. But this follows what the New England Patriots just did. And as you know, Mike Vrabel was their guy from the start. Other teams, including the Bears, were competing for his services. So what did they do? Within 48 hours of firing Gerard Mayo, they brought in two men of color to interview in person, Byron Leftwich and Pep Hamilton, two guys that weren't really actively in football at the moment, obviously just straw man interviews. And the Patriots hired Mike Vrabel as their next coach about a week after firing Gerard Mayo. Just quickly got it done. And this signals the Bears are following suit. And the timing of it, once again, it shows that Ben Johnson is their guy. And there's also a matter of who Johnson's agent is. And this move was made when he started taking interviews in this process. Per Ryan Glass-Steagall of Front Office Sports, Johnson signed for representation from NFL agent Rick Smith, president of Priority Sports. And this is a direct quote from X. Lions offensive coordinator and hot commodity head coaching candidate Ben Johnson, he has signed with agent Rick Smith of Priority Sports. The agency confirmed to FOS. And per Smith's profile on LinkedIn, the agent lives in Highland Park, Illinois. Alumnus in Northwestern University School of Law, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He's obviously connected to Chicago. And what's funny about Chicago's immediate reaction to Johnson signing with Smith, it came hours after Bears fans were in arms about ESPN's Kalen Kaler's report on the influence of sports agents and NFL coaching hires. And you guys know the history of this, but I'm going to go through it a little bit. And this is via ESPN. Since 2018, agent and ex-Chicago defensive end Trace Armstrong and his agency Athletes First have represented two fired Bears head coaches, Matt Nagy and Eberflus, three fired offensive coordinators, Mark Helfrich, man, I can't say his name, Luke Getsy, and Waldron, as well as current general manager Ryan Poles. And this is straight from her. I've never seen one agent have so much influence on one team and have such little success. But they keep going back and taking his guys, said one coaching agent who requested anonymity. And we all kind of shake our heads like, have they not figured this out yet? So, I mean, maybe Johnson signing with Smith doesn't have anything to do with the Bears. I don't agree, because Priority Sports, based in Chicago and Sherman Oaks, California, they represent also Lions head coach Dan Campbell and Washington Commanders head coach Dan Quinn. So this kind of shows us something and what is continuing to happen. And this really gives credence to Johnson to Chicago. These agents like to cluster coaching candidates together, get them on the same staffs and on the same timelines. Teams think that they're helping them find the right guys to build successful staffs, but they're just cushioning their pocketbooks. And teams like the Bears, they've fallen for this in the past. What are they really doing? Coaches typically make less money than top players. So get them clustered together on teams, get them on the same hiring cycle, same timelines, increase the chances that they'll be employed together for the longest time possible in these days of quick employee turnover. And it's essentially like, it's not lazy, but it's just kind of working smarter, not harder. Get these coaches that are making less money, less commission into these situations that they're clustered together. Try to make as much money as you possibly can and increase your commission base, make more money, then concentrate on the players where the real money is. And hopefully the Bears will move past the Armstrong reliant foolishness that they have. But regardless, if they want Johnson, this certainly doesn't hurt the process. And I think it also telegraphs that Johnson has wanted to come to Chicago this whole time. Connections are not coincidental. I also think it's very evident that their number 2 choice is fully in place. I mean, former Dallas Cowboys coach Mike McCarthy, he gained access to Hallis Hall before all these other candidates in person. He really intrigued the Bears staff from the outset, and it's worth wondering if the Bears search is now a case of him and Ben Johnson, and that's it. Because if you look at it, the Bears have been kind of cheap with candidates in the past. That's supposed to change. And they proved it by flying McCarthy out on a private plane on January 15th. Pretty much the moment that he was available, he stayed overnight in a nearby hotel, left the next day. They wined and dined him. And all of that feels notable considering the team could have provided the same for Vrabel or Pete Carroll, 2 other experienced coaches, and they chose not to. So I think Ben Johnson's been the number 1 target for most Bears fans since Flus was fired. But the Bears are not alone. Let's get to the Raiders and even the Jaguars. Las Vegas's courtship of Johnson, it includes an interview of former Lions senior director of player personnel and current Commanders assistant general manager Lance Newmark for the Raiders GM vacancy. You guys know where I'm going with this. Really hard to ignore Newmark in all this. Connection with Johnson in Detroit. It's also hard to ignore, though, that the Raiders don't have a long-term plan at the quarterback position. Let's remember that before we say that Newmark really moves the needle to get him to Las Vegas. I don't agree. And according to CBS insider Jonathan Jones, the Raiders are preparing to make a huge push for Johnson in this week ahead. Rumors hot about their interest in him. I'm just going to do a quote from him. You have Raiders minority owner Tom Brady, controlling owner Mark Davis, 3 other billionaire part owners who have been doing these searches. Brady has his eye on him to be his GM. And some wonder if he'll continue to go with people familiar with Johnson at GM to make sure he lands this coach. Johnson's going to decide very, very quickly where he's going to go. And the Raiders have been heavily connected to Johnson in this hiring cycle. You guys know that Brady is personally recruiting Johnson. But the Raiders might also find that their general manager vacancy works in their favor as well. I just covered this. Lance Newmark coming in. He was with the Detroit organization for over 20 years. And then you have the Bears committed, at least publicly, to Ryan Poles, returning for his 4th season. But it remains to be seen if is it possible they have a change of heart about his job security if it precludes them from hiring Johnson? I don't think so. I think that is in stone that he is staying. Mike Florio covered this, though. He doesn't seem to think that having Commanders assistant GM Lance Newmark for the GM position just on Sunday, he doesn't think that it really balances the scales. He's saying, per the source, that doesn't mean a lot right now. But if you're going to say that the Bears bringing in Eddie George on Sunday was a really big move to go after Johnson hard, you got to think that the Raiders, right after this playoff loss, they bring in Newmark immediately on Sunday to interview for this GM position. We just have signals going back and forth between these camps, between the teams, between these agents. It's really interesting right now, but I don't really think that bringing Newmark in for an interview, I don't think it's overly significant or that it's going to tip the scales in the Raiders' favor. I think it's just a bunch of salvos back and forth. This is really fun to watch, but I still think that the Bears are in the driver's seat for Ben Johnson. I still think Ben Johnson is their targeted guy by this Eddie George interview. as of this filming, in-person interviews with Ben Johnson have not been scheduled and are not set in stone, but you better believe that the Bears are going to be at the forefront of this. You guys, let me know what you think. Let me know who you think is in the lead for the services of Ben Johnson, or if he should even be the guy. And I don't want to hear about this playoff game, this bad performance in this playoff game, saying that Ben Johnson should not be the guy. You do not completely change your evaluation of a coach or a player due to just one single game. And if you look at it objectively as well, the Lions still scored over 30 points. So I think you can blame that loss predominantly on the turnovers by the quarterback and the defense. I don't think it's on the OC. And one trick play does not mean that he's a terrible coordinator. That's my piece. I think that if Ben Johnson was the guy for this team and he was the number one choice, the Lions losing in that playoff game should not change your full evaluation of this guy. So you guys let me know. Bear down, not Ben down, bear down. That's nice. And I'll see you in the comments.